This is the Roger Hedgecock Show. And welcome back to the Aramco Group studio here at UTTV. We've heard a lot about global warming, climate change. The United Nations has a new report out, and there's a number of questions about that report. Let's talk to some scientists. You know, we talk a lot about this climate change political topic, but how about the science of this topic? Dr. Fred Singer is with us. He is an atmospheric and space physicist and one of the world's most respected and widely published experts on the issue of climate, and thank you for being here.
I'm delighted to be here.
And then with us as well is Dr. Robert Carter, and he's a paleontologist and a marine geologist and environmental scientist, 30 years of professional experience, and also up to date on the impacts of the global warming issue, and we'll be talking to you. Dr. Carter, again, thank you for being here as well.
Good morning.
And Joseph Bast is here, who is the president and CEO of the Heartland Institute. This is a think tank that's been working a lot with scientists on this whole issue and is publishing, Joseph, I understand it now, Climate Change Reconsidered 2, The Physical Science, which is a new pamphlet coming out, or a book. Actually, it's going to be much longer than this, right?
Correct, yeah. It's a 1,000-page report written by almost 50 scientists.
Wow. All right, so let's talk about this, and I want to get to it because Dr. Carter and Dr. Singer, the United Nations report just came out. They say that 95% certainty that the human race is causing a warming which is going to have catastrophic effects. And they think that anybody who criticizes this is simply a denier and not in tune with the science of what's going on. Your view?
Well, they've been upping their estimates from 66%, then to 90%, and now 95%. And all during this time, there hasn't been any warming. The climate is not cooperating.
Now, sometimes they tell me that, well, that 15 years of non-warming is just an anomaly, that the trend over the larger period of time is warming, and that it is caused by mankind spewing these methane and CO2 into the atmosphere. What's your response?
The larger trend is natural, of course. It has been going on since the Little Ice Age, which ended, I would say, around 1800. So for the last 200 years or more, there has been a general warming, and it'll continue for a while, and then there'll be a cooling again. It's part of a 1,500-year cycle, which may be caused by the sun.
Is there anything that aggravates this cycle because of human activity?
Not as far as we can tell.
All right. Now, Dr. Dr. Carter, in your view, then, is this United Nations report scientific? Because if, in fact, there are scientific, facts that are really going the other way from the conclusion made, how did they make that conclusion?
Can I pick up your earlier question?
Sure.
and Fred's answer, which is it is indeed the case. There's been no warming now for 15 years, indeed for 17 years.
Yeah.
Now, over those same 17 years, of course, it's true, we've put more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, 8% more. But that 8% represents 33%, a full third of all the human carbon dioxide since the Industrial Revolution has gone into the atmosphere in the last 17 years, and there has been no warming at all. That invalidates the prime assumption of the Intergovernmental Panel.
The rebuttal to that I've heard is that, well, the oceans are surprisingly absorbing the CO2 in a way that we didn't think that it would do. And the problem there is it's causing the acidity of the oceans to rise, which endangers the coral and the fish and all the rest. What's your response to that?
Well, the answer is that independent scientists are laughing at this idea. It's sort of, where's Waldo in the deep ocean? Where is this heat? It's got to be in the deep ocean. And the acidification thing, the word acidification is very misleading. The oceans are alkaline. They've always been alkaline. Yes, they are absorbing some of our carbon dioxide emissions, and that will make them very slightly less alkaline. There is no threat whatsoever of the oceans becoming acid.
Now, I gotta ask you, Joe Best, in terms of the Heartland Institute, we have esteemed scientists who've worked all their lives in this area, who have come up with these conclusions, and obviously we've shorthanded a lot of this. And yet the United Nations calls these kinds of people, these distinguished professors and scientists, deniers. what's the element of propaganda and politics here?
It's a lot. I mean, a big part of this is just the communications tactic by the UN and by its allies. Obviously, they think that they can control the scientific debate and claim that they speak for all scientists or all climate science.
And yet eminent scientists are on their side.
But there are eminent scientists equally opposed. And our argument is that the center of gravity for the debate has shifted decidedly in the direction of gentlemen like this. I think most scientists don't believe that the human impact is very large, and they don't believe that future warming is going to pose any problem.
There's a great deal of discussion, speaking of the oceans, about the ice melting and the sea level rise, and those being connected. I've lived next to the ocean nearly all my life, and I've lived there for a number of years, and there doesn't seem to be any rise that I can detect, and yet they keep telling me by 2050 or by the end of the 21st century there's going to be a 3-foot rise in the, well, I live at the beach, 3 foot would be considerable, so I have a personal property interest in this because my home is there.
Yeah.
What is the validity of these kinds of projections?
I've looked into this question specifically. Sea level has been rising, of course, since the last ice age. A lot of ice has melted, and it's risen 400 feet. 400 feet. In recent centuries, sea level has been rising at the rate of about 7 inches a century. In the last century, the 20th century, sea level has risen 7 inches.
Okay.
I think it will continue to rise at the rate of 7 inches per century, no matter what we do. We can't stop it.
Now, with regard to the ice, there was a report that the Arctic ice, of course, in previous years, we've been talking about how it melts in the summer. Well, it melts in the summer, all right. But it's melting more than it used to, and there might be a Northwest Passage and all kinds of other discussions. And yet this last summer, it seems like there was a lot more Arctic ice. Again, there's obviously fluctuations, but is the ice melting?
As far as we can tell, there has been no long-term trend. We've had episodes in the past when the passage was clear. The point to keep in mind is Antarctic ice has been growing steadily.
It's growing.
Growing, yes.
Antarctic
ice.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, you've looked at this because you're looking at the ocean specifically, too.
I have, and I'm interested in your problem with living on the coast and worrying about what you're told. The key issue here is that when the IPCC talks about sea level change, they are talking about global sea level average.
Okay.
Now, you live in a house. That house has heating and cooling mechanisms, and they relate to the local temperature. No architect in their right mind builds a house to respond to the global average temperature. It's exactly the same for sea level. You don't care what the global average sea level is doing. You care about what it's doing down on your foreshore. That is determined by local tide gauges, local engineers, and good coastal planning. It has nothing to do with theories about global sea level change.
Do you also agree that we're talking about a 7 or 8 inch possibly average over a century?
Absolutely. That is the likely rate.
Now, obviously, in previous geologic time, that has reversed because a lot more ice has been created during these so-called ice ages, where a sheet will cover, for instance, most of North America, which is a lot of water. Then that recedes. What causes that to happen? It's clearly not us because we weren't around in the last ice age.
It has to do, the best explanation is astronomical, having to do with the motion of the Earth around the sun. The eccentricity of the orbit, the inclination of the axis, and the wobbling of the axis.
So less sunlight, less heat, more ice.
Less heat, more ice. More heat, less ice. So the heat...
That's understandable.
But that drives...
I wish high school physics was this simple. Okay, go ahead.
that drives the growth and decay of the great ice caps over the last 1.5 million years or so. But your question looked much further back into deep time when the interior of the North American continent was covered by a shallow sea. And that sort of movement of sea level is caused primarily by the subsidence or uplift, what geologists call tectonic activity, that just sinks the land and the sea comes in.
Now, you folks have a decidedly different view about this global warming climate change issue than, again, these folks who wrote in the UN report. Has this affected your professional life? Do you get criticism about are you called names like deniers and so forth?
Oh yes, yes, frequently. Fortunately, since I'm emeritus now and retired from my teaching position at the University of Virginia, it doesn't affect my career in any way. It doesn't affect my happiness. It doesn't affect my status.
You seem perfectly content with your
My friends still talk to me. I still publish in respectable journals.
And Dr. Carter, same question.
Well, I'm a scientist, and what interests me is scientific discussion. As soon as somebody on the other side of that discussion starts calling me names, I tend to find somebody else to go and talk to. I mean, if you're reduced to the level of criticizing your opposition on ad hominem grounds, that's a sure signal you don't have the science facts on your side.
I would think so. It's the same in politics, by the way. So, Joe Bast, tell us about the publication then, and when can we see it?
Yep, the summary for policymakers is complete and is being mailed. The full report goes to the printer on Monday and should be available for purchase in about 4 weeks. The entire report and the summary are available on our website, climatechangereconsidered.org, climatechangereconsidered.org. And I encourage everybody to look at it. Even though some of the science is pretty dense and sophisticated, I think anybody can appreciate it.
And thank you very much. Thanks for being here.